Welcome to the second day of CCS Insight's Prediction 2022 and beyond. My name is Bola Rotibi, and I'm the Research Director for Software Development, Delivery and Developer Trends here at CCS Insight. Today, I have the pleasure of hosting the next hour, which will see a range of thought-provoking prediction insights from my colleagues Marina Koytcheva, Martin Garner, Nick McQuire and myself. Together, we will be detailing the pressures along with the potential impacts facing organisations as they strive to improve their operations and engage better. We are delighted to conclude our prediction insights with my interview of Howard Boville, Senior Vice President of IBM Hybrid Cloud. This has been a time of rapid change and huge challenges, from the pandemic to climate change, but it's also one of opportunity. The last 18 months has brought into sharper focus the fault lines that underpin the way we all currently live, work, rest and play. It has done so in a way that heightens a need to evolve and adapt at all levels for a more sustainable future for all of us and the planet we live in. Inequality, climate change impact, regulations and fair development and application of the rule of law have become clarion calls for a different mode of business operation and society engagement. Citizens, organisations and governments are increasingly being held to aggressive timelines towards net zero. Understandably, the major polluters were targeted first and have been set ambitious targets. With the energy transition has come the creation of metrics like ESG, that is environmental, social and governance, which help us understand with transparency the impact that businesses are making on the planet and our communities, extending to social governance and regulation. With this transparency comes increasing focus on other major industries with their own carbon footprint and influence. The technology industry, spanning consumer devices, enterprise devices and software, and major and connectivity players are increasingly being held to account. Today, we'll be exploring how some of these pressures have influenced the market and what near to mid-term view is going forward. Companies are under pressure from consumers, public authorities and investors. But of course, the strength of this pressure is different for different industry sectors. With this in mind, I call on my colleague Marina Koytcheva, CCS Insight's Vice President of Forecasting, to provide prediction insights from a consumer perspective.
Two years ago, at our predictions event, we spoke about the rising importance to technology companies of the care for the environment. The global pandemic diverted people's attention from this topic, but only briefly. Time has only made the issue more pressing and has once again placed it high in people's minds, and this change shows in people's attitude towards connected devices. Yesterday, I introduced to you our Connected Consumer Radar, a brand new recurring survey we conduct in 4 Western countries: Germany, Spain, the United Kingdom and the United States, where we ask people about their ownership, usage and value of their connected devices, about the effect of the pandemic and other topical events on their households, but also about their expectations for the lifespan of different gadgets and about their perception of the environmental efforts of the companies that make connected devices. The study covers 18 types of connected devices with an established place in the household. Connectivity and productivity devices like mobile phones, tablets, computers. Entertainment and lifestyle devices for video, gaming, wearables. And smart home devices like smart doorbells, robot vacuum cleaners and others. It also looks at novel upcoming categories like smart glasses, smart tags and smart domestic appliances. A key learning from the first wave of our Connected Consumer Radar is that people's attitudes towards connected devices are turning more and more rational. There were days when the mobile phone was a status symbol and people queued to buy the latest and greatest model every 2 years or so. But for the majority of people, these days are behind them. They still value their devices very highly and even more so during the pandemic. However, now they want to get the most out of what they own. Depending on the type of device, between 52% and 71% of owners expect to use their connected devices for as long as they work, rather than replace them with new models earlier. 58% of people are open to buying second-hand or refurbished devices in the future, and 75% of people are interested in having devices repaired rather than replaced if they stop working outside of the warranty period. So overall, we can say that the majority of consumers are looking for ways to make the best use of their devices for longer. Of course, we live in uncertain times of economic turbulence resulting from the pandemic. And for some people, this is a reason to be more prudent when it comes to spending money. But we see these attitudes not just in people who have been negatively affected by the pandemic, but also in those who have been positively affected, financially speaking. Those who have kept their jobs and saved money since the start of the pandemic. The growing portfolio of devices people own is another possible reason for this rational behavior. People need to spread their budget, time, and affection over more and more gadgets. But we shouldn't fail to acknowledge the rising importance of people's awareness that excessive consumption hurts the environment by creating waste in the landfills, and by the impact of manufacturing, transportation, and selling of new devices. Governments have also become active in this area, with the aim of reducing the culture of throwing things away when they stop working. The European Union has mandated that manufacturers provide ways for domestic appliances and electronic devices to be repaired. In the United States, the so-called right to repair has also seen a legislative push recently to confirm consumers' right to get access to spare parts and fixed devices. And here is a prediction. The European Union's requirement for repairability will lead to greater demand for higher-priced mobile phones and longer replacement cycles by 2025. The logic is very simple. If people can make their devices work for longer, some of them will choose to buy more expensive and higher quality devices. They can use them for a prolonged period of time, or sell them on the second-hand market, where these devices will hold a relatively high residual value. So the number of products sold will diminish, but that will not necessarily hurt revenue. But people will become more sensitive not just to how often they buy devices, but also how these devices are made, transported, and recycled. We predict that by 2024, phone makers' green credentials will become an important part of consumers' purchase decision in developed markets. Environmental credentials are a factor in purchasing decisions already now, but they are not yet that important. They follow price, brand, features, and other factors in the hierarchy of people's priority. But this will gradually change, and a catalyst for this could be an initiative from leading European operators to develop a pan-industry eco-rating labeling scheme. It was unveiled in May this year, and it aims to give people information to help them identify and compare the most sustainable devices. Another catalyst is the growing effort of companies across multiple industries to communicate their environmental efforts. So how are the consumer device makers doing in people's eyes? Our connected consumer radar shows that not even the most loved and trusted brands are perceived as making enough effort for the environment. In fact, across the 4 countries we surveyed, 37% of people, this is more than 1 in 3, don't believe that any of these companies make efforts. In Germany, skeptics account for 44% of the adult population. So we have a prediction that to 2027, Apple and Samsung will struggle with negative public perception of their business's effect on the environment. The business models of these highly successful companies are based on selling more devices. In 2020, each of them sold over 300 million electronic devices. Importantly, they incentivize people to replace their devices as often as possible. And this will draw the attention of more environmentally conscious consumers and pressure groups. So these big companies have a lot of work ahead of them. Both work to become more environmentally friendly and work to communicate to their customers and build a more positive green image. But I'm far from suggesting that the growing environmental awareness is only a pain for our industry. It is also an opportunity. For example, recently Vodafone spoke about the fact that 90% of its energy consumption comes from the network. This creates an incentive for network suppliers to create energy-efficient solutions in order to differentiate through cost savings for their clients, the mobile operators. One of my favorite predictions this year is this: 6G will be the first mobile generation to feature intrinsic environmental specifications in its standards. 5G has been the hot topic over the last few years, but we are now starting to talk about 6G. 6G is truly an opportunity for the telecoms industry to show its leadership in sustainability and environmental issues. People use more and more data, and this comes with an impact on the planet. So the industry can create standards for the next generation of cellular technology to take into account factors such as power consumption, energy efficiency, and the circular economy. This will hopefully lead to a positive change for the planet, which consumers will absolutely expect from the industry by the time 6G becomes a reality. There are many other opportunities that the green trend creates for the industry, and Martin Garner will discuss some of them now.
Thank you, Marina. We're now going to jump over to the industrial world and focus on the Internet of Things and its role in sustainability. First, though, many areas of technology can help the world with sustainability. In fact, the efficiency gains from digital transformation are seen as essential if our economies are to keep growing, but in a sustainable way. And we already see the growth of ESG funds applying pressure to corporate boards to improve the greenness of their operations. This will drive demand for technology. But the Internet of Things is especially interesting here. It is uniquely well placed to contribute to sustainability, and that's because IoT typically gathers data on things that have not been monitored before. Those things or machines often use a lot of energy or resources and can generate a large amount of waste. And IoT brings an opportunity to monitor, control, and optimize them in ways we just couldn't do before. So you would think the world would be installing IoT systems as fast as possible to help save the planet. But there's a strange dilemma in the market. Only a few IoT suppliers use sustainability in their marketing. As a result, IoT is not widely seen as a sustainability thing. Just as an example of how good IoT is here, think of the wildfires we've seen around the world getting worse each year. The devastation they cause is terrible, and there's a double whammy with sustainability. Forest fires push huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and of course they make forests smaller. Now, forests are also one of the main ways for absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, so smaller forests cannot absorb as much, and global warming accelerates if we have more forest fires. Often, forest fires are only detected from satellite images, but by the time they show up on those, the fire has really taken hold and it's a major problem. Now, there are several startups providing solar-powered smoke and heat sensors. These form a mesh network across the forest and connect back through LoRaWAN or cellular. They can detect fire in a forest within an hour of it starting and alert the authorities. So the response can be much quicker and much smaller because it's less of an emergency. And more of the forest is saved, not to mention the other destruction. This is really great use of IoT, and the only sad part is that it's being led by tiny startups. Why aren't governments and big companies pumping billions of dollars into this? And one answer is that there's little direct financial return, but there is huge cost and damage avoided. When we think about IoT, there are actually several levels of sustainability benefits that you can get. Some of these depend on the role of the IoT system. Monitoring something is good. You get lots of new data. Controlling it can be better. There are often significant energy savings, less waste, and so on. And if you optimize or automate it, that can be even better. Other benefits depend on the scope of the IoT system. Working with a single thing is good, for example, a factory machine, but working with a whole system is normally better. A full smart factory is a good example. And an ecosystem is even better, perhaps a whole city, a supply chain, or a national power grid. Hopefully, you can see that more or less wherever you are on this picture, you could get more sustainability benefits by making the system bigger or more sophisticated. Now, obviously, the cost and business case are key factors here. Cost and complexity do increase as you build out the system, but customers normally find that the savings they make in energy or raw materials also increase as they expand the system. In other words, the business case lines up nicely with the sustainability benefits, and so it is realistic to raise the ambition here. So there are two big messages that come from this. One is, get started with IoT. It can save you a lot of money and help the planet. Second is, keep going. There is always more you can do. And of course, we have predictions based on this. The first one is, the sustainability credentials of industrial IoT systems start to become a major element in their marketing from 2023. As we've just seen, industrial uses of IoT can be really good for sustainability. However, the business case is normally built on cost savings or process optimization, and marketing of IoT typically does not focus on sustainability. But as we're coming out of the pandemic, sustainability is rising quickly back up the agenda, and this offers suppliers a great opportunity to enhance their reputation by putting more emphasis on sustainability in their marketing. This is a gift for IoT suppliers. We have another broader prediction here too. Going back to the role that bigger players could have and the investments they're making, green tech agenda setters will emerge in the next 5 years who are different from the current companies we call technology agenda setters. That's companies like Amazon, Alphabet, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft. The existing players are investing a lot of money to make their operations carbon neutral, but they're not investing so much in newer green technologies themselves. Companies who are investing in those technologies are focusing on capturing carbon and nitrogen, on optimization of resources, and on other sustainability-focused areas such as green hydrogen. And they are mostly in startup mode right now. A few of them will grow rapidly in size and influence and will challenge the existing agenda setters for access to capital and talent in this area. Some will even become acquisition targets for the big players too. So that's it on IoT and sustainability for now. It's a great story and an absolute gift for IoT marketing. We're running an ongoing research program on sustainability covering multiple areas of technology, so please be sure to check back in for more soon. And now I'll hand you over to Nick McQuire to discuss cloud.
Thank you, Martin. Now, the theme of sustainability has also been a major focus of the cloud providers over the past several years, and the area really kicked into gear over the past 12 months. We have seen a wave of announcements articulating major commitments in terms of net zero carbon emissions for their operations and setting ambitious goals to run their entire infrastructure fully carbon-free by 2030, for example. In fact, some of the cloud providers are now the largest purchasers of renewable energy on the planet, given this shift happening in their strategies. And what's the key reason behind all of this activity? Well, decision-making is changing, and enterprise customers, particularly those in Europe, are now demanding much more of a sustainable product from their cloud services. We believe this growing focus on sustainable cloud will only pick up steam in the coming years. And in fact, an arms race of sorts is going to emerge in the area as well. And this leads me to our next major prediction, and that is that clean cloud becomes a key battlefield of competition in the public cloud market in 2022. Now, what is fascinating about this trend towards clean cloud is that it's not just about providing sustainable infrastructure. It's also about SaaS applications as well, or sustainability as a service, as it is now becoming known, which has emerged as a category in software over the past few years. A host of cloud applications are now emerging, which help customers better measure, track, and neutralize the environmental impact of their IT decisions and footprints. And demand for these clean cloud solutions is only going to grow. In effect, the battle for the cleanest cloud is only just beginning, so expect a lot of posturing from the players in the market about who has the cleanest and dirtiest infrastructure in the years ahead. But businesses are not the only forces shaping this focus on cloud sustainability. New legislation is also arriving, such as the EU's climate law that was recently approved by the European Parliament, and this is beginning to shape the market as well. Although there's little in the current version of the law that is focusing specifically on cloud at the moment, we believe the legislation is already starting to focus the minds of customers. According to our recently published 2021 Senior Leadership IT Investment Survey, for example, which surveyed over 700 C-level executives in the US and Europe, 35% of respondents stated that commitment to environmental sustainability in technology and practices was crucial in terms of shaping trust in a technology vendor. So sustainability has now rapidly emerged a top 5 priority for enterprises when choosing a cloud provider. And I recently had the pleasure of being a judge for the 2021 UK CIO of the Year Awards and was really impressed by the number of leading CIOs who are now prioritizing this area, both in terms of their digital transformation and investment strategies. Now, another piece of major legislation that arrived this year in draft form was the EU's AI Act. And this too, in our view, will have a huge impact on cloud sustainability in the years ahead. The AI Act is the world's first major attempt at regulating AI. And built on the foundation set by GDPR, the EU is proposing a risk-based approach to regulating the technology, focusing on its uses rather than the technology itself. Among the many areas that it covers, it proposes, like GDPR, hefty fines for violations, up to 6% of global turnover. And a key prediction we have this year is that a major corporation breaches the EU's AI Act by 2025. We believe that when the Act becomes law, likely by 2023, there will be a grace period for most businesses. But as we saw with GDPR, it's inevitable that a large firm will be caught underprepared and breach the rules. Now, an area the AI Act has not yet properly tackled, however, is sustainability. And its omission from the current draft legislation, in our view, is frankly shocking. This is because we are seeing the size of AI models and the power they consume grow rapidly. In fact, some AI applications that have hit the news recently are claimed to consume enough electricity in an hour to equal the entire output of 3 nuclear power plants. Because of this, in the coming years, we fully expect that our prediction from 2 years ago now, that green AI becomes the next frontier of competition in machine learning, will come to fruition. And specifically, that the EU will bring in sustainability requirements for AI applications into the AI Act within the next few years, aligned, of course, to its climate law program, which I highlighted earlier. So watch out for that prediction. In summary, sustainability, regulation, and AI are going to be even more significant in shaping the direction of business transformation and the cloud market itself. It's going to be fascinating watching it all unfold over the next few years, and we look forward to tracking it for you. Bola, back to you.
Thank you, Nick, for your insights into the sustainability directions and considerations of many of the leading providers of key software solutions and operational services, especially in relation to trust and the use of artificial intelligence. It is vital that environmental, society, governance, and sustainability concerns and actions must do more and be more than a corporate social responsibility line item or PR tool. To maximise the potential of a diverse society, organisations across the board must be smarter and have more care for the precious resources of people and the planet. This requires them to use their assets to reduce consumption, improve operational effectiveness, and be more cost efficient to minimise the impact on their environmental resources. It also requires diversity in thinking and engagement. Now, more than ever, software technology, applications and systems are integral to the way we function as a society, and as a result are being recognised for their ability to be a change agent for social good. This calls for greater accountability at all levels of operation, and no more so than those tasked with developing the solutions capable of driving changed operations, along with those implementing and managing the underpinning information, communication, technology, and operational infrastructure. These operational stakeholders are more active in their desire for change and in doing good for society. The notion of coding or producing tech for good can be seen in their commitment in developing and delivering solutions that support and combat environmental disasters when they occur, manage the distribution of vaccines in both developed and developing nations, and look to better harness clean energy sources to deliver the power that support the way we live and work. These technical stakeholders are served with better tools and processes with an activist desire to doing good. Scaling and transforming operations and delivering traceability for all interactions across integrated workflows is more possible and served by a greater wealth of tools, solutions, and processes that are more accessible with greater focus on usability, delivering the right experiences, and meeting expectations. It's a development that highlights the importance of effective relationships and a robust ecosystem for the breadth and diversity of technology stakeholders and their client base. It also signals new dynamics in the engagement of tech providers and the solutions they look to build to support the market landscape and drive transformation that can deliver on ESG metrics. One of my predictions states that by 2026, software development companies subscribe to a recognised environmental, social and governance rating that is a major differentiator in their contract bids. The rating comprises not only energy, performance and geographical criteria, but also diversity, social and cultural well-being factors. Crucially, it presents an opportunity for improved and more diverse working environments that take care of individual and collective well-being while accepting greater levels of accountability generated by new approaches to work. Self-governance and distributed accountability as a result of higher degrees of self-service operations where users can make use of applications and resources as and when they require will allow more technical stakeholders to actively participate in driving forward solutions through the adoption of new technologies and improved processes. This will enable them to establish a basis for collective confidence in the solutions being delivered and operated by IT organisations and software providers. With all these factors in mind, I took the time to sit down with Howard Boville to discuss some of these topics to understand how IBM is addressing these challenges. Sustainability is very much a top-of-mind issue for organisations across the market. Many see technology as providing the means for addressing some of the challenges more effectively and forming part of the building blocks for a greener future. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Howard Boville, Senior Vice President of IBM Hybrid Cloud, to provide some insight into how IBM is spearheading improved sustainability in its cloud operations and affecting change for good. Howard, welcome.
Hi, Bola. Pleased to be here. Delighted to meet you.
Excellent. As someone who understands enterprise organizations very well and who's also responsible for directing IBM's global network of cloud data centers, what role can IBM play in providing organizations helping organizations to expand the scope of what they're doing with cloud to get better business savings and more sustainable and greener outcomes?
Thank you for that question, Bola. I think the key element that IBM can do, which is perhaps a little bit different from the approach other companies have is we have our own renewable energy commitments, as do all enterprises and as do all cloud service providers. And that's very, very important. But the responsible use of the capacity that we all build, the IT capacity that we all build, is incredibly important. And as you get into any large hyper-growth industry like cloud, a lot of capacity will be built out that actually uses more resources, uses more water, has more carbon emissions. And sometimes that capacity cannot be used. So building capacity for that without use. What IBM Hybrid Cloud does is we help advise customers in terms of not only actually get the best value from cloud as an enabler, but also to ensure that they're actually best utilizing the resources they have in the most efficient way. And therefore, that's the most efficient way in terms of renewable energy.
Now, obviously, lots and lots of other players are in the market. How does this differ competitively? And specifically, what about for the telco industries? Is there something, something different that you can be doing?
Yeah, so we focus on building capacity, data center capacity, for a limited number of industries, what we call regulated industries. So telecommunications, financial services, government, and healthcare. And this whole notion of actually building capacity relative to the needs is a data center actually is based upon the shapes of the applications that sit within it. And you think about it like a game of Tetris. If you can actually be very focused on the areas that you're facing off to, the Tetris game means that you've got less white space and therefore less issues in terms of redundant capacity not being used, and also therefore driving a higher economic cost and more issues around sustainability. And that's the value that we can provide not only to our customers, but also the value then to the environment in terms of how we build our architectures to meet that need. There's always a kind of a desire to build the new, and that can be a very inefficient way to do things, right? So the other approach I'm taking with the partnerships that we have with telecommunications companies is I'll happily use what they have that they would see as old, but actually can take capabilities. So what's known as the central offices, and you might recall when you used to be in the streets, you would see these boxes where there would be telecommunications equipment, or there would be these buildings that would actually be telecommunications hubs. As the digital world has got smaller and smaller and smaller, the size of those physical buildings or those physical containers is too large for the amount of telecommunications equipment that's now needed. I'll happily use those facilities and the existing power that's in there to actually offer cloud at the edge, which is different again in terms of the philosophy of building things. So I'm actually using old resources, almost kind of casting new light through old windows, which again is a very green way of doing things because you're actually not having to rebuild, you're not having to use power consumption for different areas. So it's actually just fusing together different capabilities to offer these kind of solutions that we provide that are differentiated for IBM.
That's fantastic news, actually, especially the whole sort of recycle and reuse, which is very much, the focus for many organizations is how can we reuse what's already in place. So that's an amazing example. One of the things I want to sort of move on a little bit now to is that Arvind Krishna, IBM CEO, presents a very strong strategy for hybrid cloud and artificial intelligence. However, it doesn't always, how does this translate to what I would call, green or sustainable strategy for customers, especially given the different power consumptions of the kind of different infrastructure systems that reside in many customers' IT operations. So, obviously, in some of the kind of as you rightly pointed out, sort of power consumptions for some servers and, sort of data centers, but there are others in sort of on-premise environments as well. So how do you sort of balance this out? How do you square that? What can you suggest?
So the strategy that IBM is under Arvind's leadership is one of a hybrid cloud and AI. And hybrid means on-premise and off-premise. So we're not on the notion where everything will move to the public cloud. There will still be on-premise applications and on-premise data sets for a range of different reasons. And some of those workloads will also then be in the public cloud. We come in with an architectural perspective as to how you can drive the most efficiency from operating in those two modes of operation, on-premise and off-premise. And within that, it means that we also then look at the business processes, the associated systems that sit beneath, which are the applications and the data sets. And then also then the actual underpinning resource pools, so the actual servers and the data centers that are used. So not only can we drive business value to actually decalcify those business processes and therefore create frictionless and convenient experiences for our customers by doing that application modernization and migration work, we can also massively improve the actual utilization of the actual assets they use. And by doing that, that actually then reduces the amount of power consumption that those applications, data sets, and those actual pieces of infrastructure that work upon as well. And that's all driven because of IBM's unique position to take an architectural view, where when you talk to IBM, the answer isn't cloud, what's the question? The answer is, from IBM, what is the business value that you're trying to drive? We're not turning up with a tool, which is cloud, and saying that's the answer, because a tool isn't a strategic destination. We want to understand what the customer is trying to do, and then we'll provide the appropriate architecture that delivers the most efficient solution that actually then reduces the amount of power consumed.
It's really, you feel architecture's back in the game. Is that something that you're getting? And tied to very much the sustainability story? Because I think that seems to be something that is a foundation piece.
It is. It's kind of. It does go in and out of fashion. And we've lived in kind of some of the 1960s and 1970 buildings that seem to like a whole degree of architecture. So there's a lot of analogies there. But architecture is just fundamentally important to any good design. And I think what we're doing is we're coming out of kind of chapter one of cloud. And chapter one was about people experimenting with what it could do, people getting confused that it was a strategic destination in and of itself. And what's happened that I observed from talking to many enterprises, not all, but a number that were early adopters, is they've created this kind of Frankenstein's monster of piece parts that they've stitched together to try and make the old be more efficient than the new, but they've actually introduced more complexity in every dimension, including the amount of power consumption, not only from their own data centers, but from actually other providers. If you come in with an architectural approach, okay, it may be a little bit slower in terms of what you're going to go forward with, but it's almost like the kind of the tortoise and the hare. The actual steady approach will actually get you to your destination in a far quicker approach than the hare, because nothing that endures happens overnight. It needs to happen with good design and deliberate steps, one after the other in the same direction. And unless you have an architecture, you're not sure what that direction is, nor are you sure what the destination is, right? So having the architecture is essential, but sometimes it's foregone because people want to move fast. But moving it fast doesn't get you to a good destination. Architectures do, and they actually get you there more quickly.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So do you think you're back in fashion then? Because I hear a lot of the things that you're saying, and hearing a lot of the kind of relationships that you're seeing out with sort of customers in terms of the cloud solutions that you're providing, and certainly it's been quite vocal. So we're going to hear more from you on that front then.
Yeah, I suspect we have. I mean, maybe our aspiration would be to be in style as opposed to in fashion, because style is more enduring than fashion. I guess we all wear bell bottoms at some point, and the fashion disasters that we did. But I guess the drive would be to be kind of back more into style in terms of the approach that we take. But we think these kind of core attributes of what IBM is a business and always has been is doing the right thing with good design, good architectural standards, and so on, puts us in the right path. The other approach that we have, which is different perhaps to the other providers as well, is we don't see ourselves in a place that we are in some sort of mortal combat with our competitors. And that isn't because we lack humility. We definitely have humility as a company. We'd far rather collaborate with these other companies to take the capabilities that they've got to actually then deliver more business value. And that's why we have this hybrid multi-cloud strategy where we work with other cloud partners to drive things on the agenda, such as sustainability.
Well, we're coming towards the end of this what's been a really great conversation, Howard. And now one of my last questions, it's obviously something that's very dear to my heart since I cover software development, but cloud is often seen as the domain of the kind of IT development community, especially in helping them deliver solutions that transform the experiences and engagement of their customers. Are you able to provide any sneak insights into any cloud-specific plans that IBM has for the community?
There's a few things in terms of how we see ourselves differentiated, particularly for the developer community. Probably kind of outline three. The first is that if you're writing applications, and you'll know this, applications will use resources in different ways. And the world has got very much narrow on a single type of silicon called x86, when actually there's other capabilities you could have, which is power, Z, which is in our mainframe environment, and then increasingly quantum compute, which actually takes us away from the world of digital of ones and zeros and back to nature, where we're actually manipulating atoms in order to do these very complex floating point calculations, which is beyond super exciting and is far closer than you'd imagine as opposed to science fiction. So we'll create this capability where developers can develop against the Ferrari, or they can develop against the Toyota Camry based upon the needs of the actual journey that they're going on. So we think that's super exciting for developers. The second area is in terms of how we work with developers around creating frictionless and convenient experiences. And what we mean by that is actually highly available platforms, performant platforms, and have the right controls and business continuity plans around them. Because that, if in the age of instant gratification, none of us will tolerate more than 5 milliseconds of latency on anything that we do. So how you architect for that is super important. And then the third area is drawing upon the Red Hat capability, where we have an open source community of 8 million developers that make their contributions to the platforms that we operate with on. And we think that's the right way to do applications. If you've got an enterprise software team of 30 or 40 or 50,000 people, that's important, but it doesn't give you the same degree of protection against cybersecurity. If you've got 8 million developers and therefore 16 million pairs of eyes looking at lines of code, that typically gets out any of the issues you have with the race conditions in the environment. You don't get that without that level of scale. So they're the three kind of primary areas that we will continue to drive a lot of innovation for the development communities.
Well, Howard, I could talk forever. We could have this conversation for a long time. It's been fantastic, actually, having the chance to speak to you and to hear, sort of the strategies that both yourself and IBM are putting in place, especially around sustainability. So, but before we leave, because we're obviously at Predictions, CCS Insights Predictions event, I wonder if you could perhaps give us one or two predictions that you might want to share with our audience.
Quantum compute is a different way of computing, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, where you're manipulating atoms, and it's no longer about a 1 and 0. There can actually always be something that's a 1 and a 0, which exponentially increases the compute power. So how do I kind of bring that alive in a real context? There are problems that currently can't be solved by compute capability. Even the most strongest supercomputer on the current technologies can't solve complex problems such as carbon emissions. It's not possible currently to properly calculate what a thing will do in terms of the carbon emissions that will be provided. And as a consequence of that, it's not easy to understand then what innovation needs to take place to actually reduce the number of carbon emissions. So that's absolutely not a possible calculation to be done with classical computing. With quantum computing, that can be calculated in 3.5 days. So from something that was impossible to something that is possible in 3.5 days. And then with the data that will provide in terms of what it takes from a carbon emission to actually then create molecules that actually cause issues, and then what you can do to actually create models to actually offset that will massively accelerate our ability to develop technologies that actually can reduce carbon emissions and therefore reduce global climate change that wasn't possible previously, because we wouldn't have had the mathematical architecture to determine what the answers would be to address that problem. So that's a prediction. And we're not far away from that.
I'd just like to say thank you, Howard, for taking the time to speaking to myself and the team here at CCS Insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bola. It's been a complete pleasure.
What a fantastic interview between Bola and Howard. That wraps up everything for today, but we'll be back tomorrow for day 3 of CCS Insight's Predictions 2022 and beyond. We'll be looking at the future of networks and connectivity. Join us then.